Everybody, welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. We've got another post-game reaction, Seattle Storm post-game reaction, a nail biter for the shorthanded Seattle Storm, a 90-87 win. The Storm sweep the four-game season series against the Sparks this year. I think our writer Christian was saying they haven't won the season series against the Sparks in a long time.
9 years.
That's pretty
Yeah.
remarkable considering the teams that the Storm have had.
I
Like,
I'm not sure if they hadn't won the series or if they hadn't sweep the series in nine
ah,
years.
yeah.
I would have to look that up, but
I'm
still
sure I'll
impressive.
probably do it while we get your thoughts. So we'll begin this. The Storm with this win, they've got 2 games left in the regular season. They've already clinched a playoff berth. It becomes more and more likely. I think it's a very small chance that they'll face anybody but the Aces in the first round. They're a game behind the Aces for that 4 seed. They obviously play each other head to head. Before we get ahead of ourselves and talk about Asia and Las Vegas, Rowan was on site for us at this game. Rowan, what were your just opening statements, opening thoughts about this game? Whether it was the fact that Seattle was without Jewell Loyd due to a knee injury and Magbegor due to a concussion, the great start. Just your opening statements from this game is you were the one who was there for us.
Yeah, I mean, you said it was a nail biter, and it was, but it was not for a majority of the game. So that is kind of what was interesting. The initial thought is just that it didn't look like it was going to be a nail biter at the beginning. I mean, the Storm led by as many as 16 points at one point, and they looked like they were going to win it really easily. So it got to be really close at the very end, and that was not expected. But overall, I mean, I think they did a really great job without Jewell and Ezzy, honestly. I mean, obviously they played LA how many games ago? Four, 3, 4 games ago. And they still only won by 8. So without Ezzy and Jewell, who, last year were kind of the only producers offensively. I thought they did a really great job. Gabby with 22, Neko with 23, Skylar with 19, and Jordan off the bench with 16. I don't think you could have asked for anything better offensively as as a team. So I think overall it's a positive. It shouldn't have been as close as it was at the end, but overall I think it's really good to know that even without those two Olympian all-stars, you still have a really good shot of having a lot of people producing.
To go back to it, yes, the Storm and the Sparks matched up back on September 11th. So it's kind of a sandwich. Play the Sparks on the 11th, go and play the Wings on the 13th, and come home and play the Sparks to wrap that up. And to put a bow on the sweep, yeah, it was the Storm swept the season series from the Sparks for the first time since 2015. It was their third series sweep of the Sparks. Seattle's won 12 of the last 16 games against
All
Los
right.
Angeles.
Good to know.
Um, yeah, no, at least from what I could tell as I was watching it via my Amazon Prime Video. Um, it was exciting. It was actually Rowan sent this to our Storm coverage group. It was like, I don't know, this first I might be jinxing it, but this first half is good basketball. Um, and then, it's tough l- just looking at game. I hate looking at games on the surface and just being like, okay, bad record, good record. How come this game wasn't bigger? Because the Sparks, I mean, Ron, you know this. Like, obviously, the Storm, you want to see them have better wins, so to say. But the Sparks have been a chippy team all year long. And this has been even without obviously Cameron Brink. Rakia Jackson has played really well all year, largely since the All-Star since Olympic break, I believe it was. Or she's been really efficient. This is a team that's been really chippy. And Seattle had only 8 players, so I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah, certainly I'm sure you would have liked to see more. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just was gonna say, I mean, every team, it feels like this season, to me it feels like rankings don't matter and haven't mattered. And at this point, you have teams who are out of playoff contention that are still playing like they're trying to get a playoff spot. Like no one is tanking the entire season. It's been, you might lose to one team that has a bad record, but then that team will turn around and beat the best team in the league. It feels like this whole season has kind of been like this. But I was going to say, Yeah, Rakia Jackson has been amazing for them. I think that was one of the keys that I wrote down before the game and asked, Noelle Quinn about pregame was how do you contain Rakia, because she had 26 points 4 days ago when they played them the last time. And that was one of my keys for what kind of happened in the second half. I believe she had 10 at halftime. And so I was like, oh, that looks, that's pretty good. She might not have even been in double figures. I'd have to look at that again. But she ended with 22 points. So definitely not contained as much as I'm sure the Storm would have wanted her to be, with only 4 less points than before. But also I think Odyssey Sims has been huge for LA in this end of the season, because she hasn't been with them all season. She's a player that has not been with that team all season. She's been on 2-3 different teams, and she was their starting point guard, and she had 20 points, and she's actually really helped LA a lot, even though they are not in playoff contention. But so she was huge for them too.
Speaking of huge in Odyssey Sims, seeing Odyssey Sims of all people do the too small was pretty unique,
It
right?
was.
I mean, I remember seeing that on my screen. I was like, is this the right player doing this? But
Shortest probably on the court at
it
that
is,
point.
who was it? Was it that last Sparks game where I don't know if it was you might have picked that out, or if it was Christian, where it was the quote from Noe. I think someone asked about like the pick that Seattle had that they traded to the Sparks
Mm-hmm.
could have been Rakia Jackson. Like
Yeah.
it was fascinating because you look at it in one world and it's like that would be, you add another big, to this lineup. You have another young post player to add. It's funny we're talking about Ezzy Magbegor and still saying young, but she
Mhm.
is to add there, and that could be two pillars of your franchise moving forward. And I think you're happy either way, honestly, and in either like the reality that we have or that scenario. But it was fascinating to hear Noe talk about that because
Mhm.
it's just been really fun to watch her. And as long as her and Cameron Brink are in LA, if they are for a while, the team should be dangerous,
Definitely.
depending how they figure that out. Key players, Rowan, who really stood out to you? I mean, like you've kind of got, if you're looking just purely at points, you've got three big players. If you have someone who's underrated, please feel free to let me know in this game. But you have Gabby, NECA, and Skylar all really kind of picking up the load offensively. Jordan Horson came off the bench and brought 16, which was big. It's always great to see Jordan bring that energy. Who did you think was your big key player to a Storm win in this game? And if there's someone that's underrated to you that maybe didn't fill the stat sheet, please feel free to let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be Gabby Williams. I think the way that she stuffs the stat sheet is just crazy when you're looking at it. I mean, especially in the first half, just seeing the steals that she had, she immediately was my player of the game. I mean, it was she's just in every passing lane, just getting rebounds, getting steals in a way that it feels like I feel like I can't think of any other players that I've watched in the league that are able to do it at the efficiency that she does, I feel like. So I love to see her generating scoring as well. I feel like what we saw a lot last season and the season before, her first 2 seasons in Seattle, was that you'd see her fill the stat sheet in almost every other category but scoring, and it was super helpful. And it was never something that that Noelle Quinn or the rest of the coaching staff was disappointed in. It was helpful, but seeing her produce double digit games, 20-point plus games, like that is just more than they could even ask for from her. So definitely her. But I also think with NECA and Skylar, I kind of was noting that the time that LA took the lead back for the first time since probably I think the first bucket in the game, when they took the lead back in the fourth quarter. It was when NECA and Skylar were out of the game, and immediately when they both checked back in, NECA scored immediately when she came back in, and they just completely changed the tempo of the game and really helped them win in the end. So I feel like Gabby overall key player, but they couldn't have done it without NECA or Skylar. coming up in very key moments throughout the game.
Yeah, to touch on the steals point, because so every Storm game day, unless something happens, I do the game day post, right? There's the game day post, there's a key player, and then there's the stats. With the stats, we've always got the defensive stats with steals and blocks per game, and the Storm have led in both of those categories like for the entirety of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So Gabby had a season high 4 steals, to your credit. Seattle entered the game with a league leading 9.4 steals per game. They recorded 13 in this one, including 10 of them in the first half.
I was going to say, and that was something that I noticed, the first half, I believe the Storm had 10, the Sparks had 3, and then they ended up tying in steals at the end, both teams with 13, or yes, both teams with 13 in the end. So it was like really, really impressive first half. And I asked Noelle Quinn about that too. Was it just the way that this team was playing in the first half? They're stealing, fast breaks are crazy. They had 6 fast break points to LA 0 at the half, and then in the end, it ended up that LA outscored the Storm in fast break points 14-7. So I was asking, what changed there? Was it just that the Sparks kind of tightened up on their passing, or was it a passion and energy problem from the Storm? But I just think that's interesting. It's really impressive stats in the first half with that, but then kind of fell apart a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean I did hear that on the post game, because I think I didn't have the audio on, but someone tweeted that Noelle said, when asked by Elisa Woodward, she said that the team was playing with pride. And I think you asked about that. That was the beginning of that question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's interesting because, yeah, I mean, there's so many starts to the game. And I think our friend Roberta asked, it was like the topic discussion so often with this team lately has been their slow starts. Um, so it's been fascinating to see them kind of in this one really wake it up and start fast from the jump. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but just yeah, in the steel department, I want to close that out. This game marked the Storm's 20th game this season with 10 plus steals, which is 5 more than any other team in the WNBA.
Wow.
I mean, anytime someone new comes in to like ask Noe questions and they ask about something that sets her up for defense, I can hear it already. Well, our bread and butter is our defensive play. I'm just like, yep,
Yep.
I know it's coming.
Yep.
But I mean, it's true. Like again, like with the blocks and the steals, like I'm sure though, as this kind of moves us into our areas of concern topic, it was fascinating, right? Because I'm gonna ask this, and then I want you to talk about it. And if you've got a different area of concern from this game, uh, take it from there. But as someone who's just looking at the stat sheet and didn't get to watch the full game in depth, it's fascinating to, talk about the defense, talk about the steals, all that. But then we look here, and Seattle gave up 58 points in the paint. That's not great. And I understand, obviously, you're missing a defensive player of the year candidate in Izzy Magbegor. But you still have Mercedes Russell, who I believe is your tallest player on this roster.
Mhm.
And Nneka Ogwumike is historically one of the better defensive forwards of all time. Um, yeah, I don't know well, and then the team rebounds. The Sparks doubled Seattle's number in 5 to 10. Seattle only had 5. Sparks had 10. Just it didn't seem like the best day in the paint for
Mhm.
Seattle. Rowan, what were your thoughts on that? Because I mean, if you look at that, right, and obviously, the Sparks have been chippy. They do have some talented forwards. Why does that number look like it is? Is that something that you are concerned about, or is it there's something that happened to maybe inflate that number? Because you look at it and it looks concerning.
Definitely. I mean, if you look at just the if you look at the Sparks scoring in general, I mean their leading scorer was Dearica Hamby, who spends a lot of time in the paint. So I'm assuming that a good chunk of those points, of those 25 points, were from that. And then same with Rukia. I mean, I couldn't say at this point without watching again if how many of those points of hers were in and out of the paint, but having those two as your leading scorers, there wasn't a lot of guard offensive scoring from the Sparks, but it's definitely I would say it is definitely concerning. I mean, not having Ezzy, as I said before, clearly the Storm they're doing okay offensively without Ezzy and Jewell, which is huge because last season, if either of them, weren't producing offensively, there was no hope for the Storm, honestly. And so, but that is true that, when they talk about priding themselves on defense, it is concerning that they can't keep up with a team that is not very post dominant, let's say. The Sparks are not a team that I would think of as they get most of their points in the paint. So it is particularly alarming to have that kind of number from a team like LA. So yeah, I would say surprising. I mean, Mercedes was on the floor for 23 minutes and it didn't feel like there was that much of an impact from her defensively. If I'm thinking about it right now, I mean, she had 6 rebounds, which is great, but yeah, I think that you have to be able to still defend in the paint well when you have someone as tall as Mercedes and as talented as NECA in the paint doing those, having those defensive assignments. So I would say that that is a concern. But if Ezzy comes back, then which I mean, she will. I'm not saying when, and I'm not saying if, when she comes back, that should hopefully be a problem that isn't happening anymore. But you can't, you have to be able to game plan for if you don't have someone of defensive player of the year caliber. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I mean, you could look at it towards a playoff angle, and I guess they're directly related when I say this, because you look at it with a playoff angle, and you could look at it with the next game. Because I mean, the Aces are a team that can definitely get into the paint and cause you some problems. And I mean, even if you look around, I mean, you look at a team like New York, who you haven't beaten all year, you haven't beaten since 22, despite really close games last year somehow. That's another team that can get into the paint. Like the best teams in this game, and that includes you. Like this is a Storm team that does get in the paint actively. Like they are one of the teams that leads in that category in this league. Um, you have to be able to guard that, and it feels like so often against at least the best teams in the league, they haven't necessarily done that. I know in Connecticut, the last time they were in Connecticut, in that second game, they did a better job of that. But I don't know. It is something that as we get to the end of the season, into the regular season, that is, I don't and understanding the caliber of player you're missing, I'm still like, yeah, this is not great. So, um, just to wrap it up, just your thoughts. What are you going to take away from this game as we've got 2 games left in the regular season? Obviously, like we just talked about, you factor in the fact that the Storm were without 2 all-star caliber players. What do you take from this game, and what do you want to see in 2 days against the Aces?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I mean, I would say honestly all positive takeaways. Um Honestly all positive takeaways from me. I think again having four players in double digits, one being off the bench, I think is huge. It's a I think that that's a really great thing to see that when you don't have your most when you don't have the person that broke the single season scoring record last year on the court, you can still produce offensively. So I think that that's huge. And I think especially when comparing the game just 4 days ago, that you really didn't win by that big of a margin when you did have them. And so you were still able to really have the same game without them. I think that that's huge. I think that I mean the Aces are going to be really really tough. This is kind of a weird part of the season where both teams are really fighting, for that 4th seed spot. And I think that these, again, like you were saying, every game it feels like recently the record really doesn't matter, but it's slightly concerning that the last 3 games have been LA, Dallas, and I mean, well, even going back to Phoenix, which was a great win for the Storm, but still, LA, Dallas, and then LA again, all very close games. I think is a little bit concerning when you're going up against a Vegas team that I feel like is playing the best basketball right now that they have all season. But I think on a positive note with that, I have brought up concerns in articles I've written before in post game interview, everything that I have always seen a bit of an issue with the way that Noel Quinn's coaching staff coaches in late game, close game scenarios. And that's just been something that I feel like they've really struggled with. And these past 3 games have honestly been good prepping for the playoffs when you are probably going to have close games. And I think that they've executed really well and a lot better than they have in the past 2-3 years, honestly. So I'd say that that's a positive. Close games, not great with the teams that it has been with, but at least we know that they can get it done now. And that I think that the play calling late game has been a lot better than in years past. So just hoping that they can, every team is a threat, regardless of standings, but still is a little bit concerning when you're going up against a team that's been so neck and neck with you all season, if you can't get it done against these other teams.
And this is something we will probably look at further. We'll try to do a Storm Roundtable once the regular season ends, after they play the Mercury on the road. But so much of this team, this year feels like, I think we've, whether it's Christian and I, or I think you and I have talked about this, but you look at this team and the talent that it's got on this roster, and then you look at the Liberty, and it's kind of a similar situation. That first year, the Liberty kind of destroying it. I mean, they ended up making the finals, which is his own thing, but it doesn't feel like Seattle is all the way to where they can be as a unit, right? And they very well could be setting up for next year, but I mean, nothing's guaranteed. Some could happen to any one of your 4 stars. Maybe they don't want to come back. So I don't know. Maybe this could be your one shot. So it's interesting to look at. Anyway, I wanted to wrap it up here talking about the playoff scenarios because, Seattle can only finish fourth or fifth. Obviously, Tuesday's game against the Aces is big. There's only one possibility where the Storm can finish something other than fourth or fifth, and that would wait. So, no, sorry. It's almost guaranteed that Seattle will play the Aces. The only other possibility is that if Connecticut loses all 3 of their final games, which I believe they lost to the Aces tonight,
They did.
And Las Vegas wins all 3 of their final games, then Vegas would finish as the 3rd seed, and Connecticut would finish as the 4th seed, based on head-to-head tiebreaker, and then that bumps down Seattle to the 5 spot. Unfortunately, because Las Vegas got a win over Indiana in one of the most recent games, it's basically secured their tiebreaker against Seattle, but it's not 100% secure. So Las Vegas wins the tiebreaker regardless of if Seattle wins the head-to-head game on Tuesday, if Indiana wins one of its next 2 games, or if Las Vegas beats Connecticut on Sunday. The best way to look at this, because I'm throwing a bunch of numbers at you, if Seattle's best chance to finish as the 4th seed is if they go 3-0 in their final 3 games, which they've done the first part, and then the Aces go 1-2, which feels unlikely in my opinion. Or if the Storm go 2-1, and the Aces go 0-3. So I don't know. I don't feel super great about hosting. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a really weird thing to be playing them so late in the season when you know that you're probably going to see them again very soon. But yeah, again, I personally think that Vegas is playing their best basketball right now, at this point in the season, and I'm not sure if I would say I don't think I would say the same about Seattle at this point. I think, yeah, no. So yeah, no. So if they can get back there, if they can get back to where I feel like they were at one point in the season, I think that they have a really great shot. But right now, the way that they've played these past 3 games, I just think that they're barely scraping by, and you can't do that against the Aces.
Which is somewhat remarkable, right? Because you look at these 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you're on a 4-game winning streak. Your last loss was to the Liberty, and that was a game really that they were in, and if they played a little bit better in a few areas, they could have won.
Mhm.
Like the games against the Liberty that they've lost all of their games against the Liberty this year, obviously last year as well. But it feels like so many of those games have been like just a few areas here and there. If Seattle's better, then they're really in it. But anyway, you're on a 4-game winning streak. Like in a bunch of other scenarios, right? We're talking about this team and a 4-game heater, and you've got 2 games left. You're like, okay, they're coming into the playoffs well. It's like that's not the case,
Mhm.
which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, 2 big matchups because I know we're talking about the Aces a lot, but the Mercury are obviously they're playoff bound, right? I'm not crazy.
Yes.
You've got the Mercury. They're a weird team though, and Seattle's handled them this season. So I don't know. It's fascinating. We'll have to look more at some of the issues of this team when we finish out the regular season after the 19th. But Rowan, I want to thank you for coming on. Hopefully, I'd say hopefully we have better things to talk about. But again, they're winning, so
Yeah.
it's
That's
a
the weird thing
very
about this
odd
game.
team.
Yes, I feel like it was not a great game, but they still won. So,
So that will wrap it up. Yes, next game Tuesday, September 17th at Climate Pledge Arena, 7 o'clock tip-off. Storm Aces again, 4th seeds on the line. Feels unlikely the Storm can get it. That game will be on Fox 13 Plus, Amazon Prime Video, and if you've got NBA TV, it's on that too.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, where are you going to watch the Seattle Storm away games this year?
Away games. Well, Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, so I was thinking of coming here if that's okay with you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. See you all here.